welcome to the Art of Being Human. Now, what I did on the last segment is I gave you a general overview without going into all the things that can happen, all the things that should happen, all the things you don't want to happen in terms of prenatal development. So today I'm going to take off and I'm going to go week by week, a couple of weeks, and tell you what happens. I think that the whole idea of having a baby is pretty miraculous, because if you just consider at 8 weeks old, which is only, well, 8 weeks from conception. When we say when I'm talking about age, I'm talking about age from conception. At 8 weeks old, your baby's the size of a grape, just a little tiny grape. I nearly brought a grape in, and I decided not to do it. 1 inch, that's all, 1 inch. And yet at 9 days after conception, the tissue which is going to go into the heart, it's going to become the heart, is already spasming on a regular basis. It's already trying to establish a beat pattern. 9 days old. Your baby isn't even on the size of a grape yet, and yet the heart tissue is trying to start. So people who say that life doesn't start until after birth, it's just nonsense, because there's growth, and the organs are being formed a little bit at a time, very, very tiny, very, very immature. But you can pick out, if you know how to do this and you know how to read the sonogram, you know where the brain's going to be, you know where the heart's going to pump. And it all starts at a very, very minute, small period of time. You know, so it's just something I'm really fond of thinking about. By the time that the baby has got to be about 5.5 weeks from conception, a sonogram and an ultrasound will show that there really is a baby there. It takes about 6 or 7 weeks to detect the heartbeat, but we know that the heartbeat starts as early as 9 days old. By the eighth week, the baby and the heartbeat can be detected. Now, it's not going to look particularly human. It's going to look a little fish-like. Its shape is going to be different, but it gets more complex and more human-like as it goes along. So pregnancy, as I said before last time, is divided into 3 trimesters. The first trimester is 3 weeks to 13 weeks, or from the age of conception to 13 weeks. The second trimester is 14 to 26 weeks. The third trimester is going to be 27 to 40 weeks. And this is the synopsis of the baby's growth. The sperm meets the egg and it becomes a zygote. It's called a zygote at that time. It travels to the uterus where it becomes a blastocyst, and then at about 6 weeks it becomes a placenta. It becomes embryo, and by the time that the baby is born, it's now called a fetus. So you go through that cycle, and it's all based upon the complexity of the cells, the cell development. And when you first notice, or the pictures that I've seen of babies just developing, and when they get to that blastocyte or zygote, it looks just like a bunch of little tiny cells. It doesn't look like much of anything. But those cells will differentiate, they will subdivide, and then you start getting the major organ systems developing. So let us go and start what happens, like for example, in week 3. And I have already basically told you, in week 3, the sperm will have met the egg. There will be 1 cell, the 2 becomes 1, and then it becomes a zygote. Then it travels to the uterus. So you have the conception occurring. The ovary or the ovum comes out from the ovary, and then they meet somewhere along the fallopian tubes, and then they're going to travel. It's going to take 7 days or so to get to the uterus, which is already prepared to accept them, because the uterus has already built up. There's a little endometrium in the inside of it, and it's all, just a soft kind of thing, tissue to hold and support the baby. And so then you're going to know that you're pregnant, because when the hormones start changing in the body, you're going to get sensitivity, you're going to get all kind of the nausea that the women have, when they become pregnant. Okay, week 4, the amniotic sac is forming. Now, I've shown you sketches of that before. The baby is in a sac. It's called the amniotic sac. You have one level of tissue called the ectoderm, which is going to form the brain, the nervous system, the skin, and the hair. Then you have the mesoderm, which is going to form the skeleton, the circulatory system, the kidneys. Then you have the endoderm, in which the intestines, the lungs, and the internal lungs are formed. That's week 4, already the subdivision into those different types of tissues that are going to form those various organs. Very, very immature, but definitely beginning. By this time, the baby is 1/5 of an inch long, and he is 4 weeks, just 4 weeks from conception. Then week 5, the heart and the brain and the skeleton start to form. 5.5 weeks, they are now 2/3 of an inch long. I showed you that before in the graph that I had. Very immature, but definitely all of those major organ systems are starting to form. So that's week 5. Week 6, he becomes an embryo. And this is a critical growth period in the baby's life, in the embryonic stage of development, because the heart is now beating and the brain is growing. And so the organ systems are not only forming, but they're forming in such a way that they're functioning at a very immature level, nonetheless functioning. So week 6, it becomes an embryo, and if there's any malformations that occur in the 6th week, the baby is really going to feel that. In terms of after birth, you're going to see disabilities, but it starts around age 6 weeks after conception. Week 7, the leg buds arrive. In other words, a little protrusions that's going to be the legs are going to be the arms are going to start happening. The hands and the arms are just beginning, and the lungs are beginning to grow. That's only week 7. You still aren't even at the point where the baby's the size of a grape yet. So I find that fascinating. Then week 8, the heart is starting to become more complex. The elbows and the ankles are starting to grow. The face becomes more recognizable. It's beginning to look more human-like. Eyelids, nose, tongue, ears, all starting to grow. The baby is now the size of a grape. It is now 1 inch long. That's just week 8, but you see you've got the bones starting, the brain starting, the heart starting, the major organs are beginning to grow, so that is something else. Week 9, the limbs and reproductive organs are starting to grow. The organs are forming. The baby is beginning to move now. It couldn't move before. Week 10, the baby has now become a fetus. Now, from age 10 weeks after conception until the birth, the baby will be called a fetus. So you go through the early stages, the zygote, the blastocyte, the embryo, and now it has become a fetus. And even at week 10, which is still very, very tiny, it's only 2 weeks after the size of a grape, it has 20 little tooth buds, 20 little places that are going to have teeth in its mouth. Week 11, it starts to develop fingernails and hair, and now the baby, believe it or not, can yawn. The baby is only at this point 2 inches long. He weighs 3/4 of an ounce. That's the same as a letter I mentioned last time. If you held on to a stamped letter, that is going to be the same as 3/4 of an ounce. The baby only weighs 3/4 of an ounce, and yet now it's able to yawn, and it's 2 inches long. Week 12, all the major structures have formed. The heartbeat is heard on the Doppler. You can hear a heartbeat on a Doppler machine. The fingers and toes are beginning to separate. No longer are they little buds here and there. You can start seeing a division between the fingers and the toes, and the baby can now smile a little. Now the baby is about the size of a plum. How big is a plum? About this big. And you have all the cell division that's occurred to put all those organs in place, not fully developed, but it's starting to develop, and it's the size of a plum. That was week 12. Week 13, the intestines are forming, and the baby is now 3 inches long. He can smile and he can frown, 3 inches. Most women gain about 5 to 15 pounds in the first half of the pregnancy, and then they gain about 1 pound a week from 20 weeks to full term. So the baby's getting larger. The woman may be getting more uncomfortable. The uterus is stretching because it has to accommodate a growing baby. And as I said before, and I'll just review this, 8 weeks, the baby's the size of a grape. 12 weeks, the baby is the size of a plum. That is about the end of the first trimester. 16 weeks, the baby's the size of an orange. 20 weeks, the size of a grapefruit. 28 weeks, the size of a cantaloupe. And 36 weeks, the size of a small watermelon. So you can see the growth that occurs. Now we begin with the second trimester. The weeks are going to be week 14 through 26. During this time, the mothers feel pretty well. This is probably the best trimester that a woman will have in pregnancy because she will feel better than she has before. The morning sickness that the person had when the hormones were raging is now pretty much gone. Headaches are pretty gone. Fatigue is diminished. So how, if I want to take this back a step, how does a woman know that she's pregnant? Well, the periods have stopped. That's a big clue. But you see the headaches, morning sickness, all of the stuff, the headaches, all of the kinds of things they suffer, tiredness and all of that, sensitivity, all of that stuff will give them a clue that they're pregnant. But by the time they get to the trimester, second trimester, a lot of those symptoms are gone. Week 14, the baby is making breathing motions. They're beginning to breathe. Now you remember that there's a sac around the baby, and that sac is filled with amniotic fluid. When the baby swallows or digests or breathes, they're really breathing this amniotic fluid because they are getting their oxygen from the mother through the umbilical cord. So they're just practicing the movements in utero that they're going to need when they get out. When they get out, because they're born, their bodies are going to have to get used to a lot of work that they didn't have to do when they were developing, that the mother took care of through the placenta and through the umbilical cord. So it's going to be quite a stretch for them. That's why the neonatal period, which is the first month, is basically a month where the baby learns to survive. Week 14, baby is making breathing motions, the amniotic fluid is being breathed, and the oxygen continues to come from the mother's blood. Week 15, now the baby can suck, and there is fine hair, not the hair like we have, but a finer version of hair that's beginning to grow on his little body. That's week 15. Week 16, the reproductive organs are forming. The baby is now the size of an orange, and the baby is now 6 inches long. Week 17, the baby is getting fat layers. Why? Because of the fact that even if the organs are formed, he can't survive until he has something to protect him from the outside world, which would be the skin and the fat layers. But at week 17, the baby is now beginning to hear. He now can hear. Week 18, the baby's very active. That's 4.5 months. He's now 8 inches long. At week 19, there's a lot of activity in the bowels of the baby, so the intestinal system is beginning to gear up. Week 20, half of the pregnancy is over. The baby is now the size of a grapefruit, and it's about 5 months. And it's 10 inches long, so you see there's been quite a bit of growth. Week 21, the baby has a sleep schedule. It sleeps and it wakes, and it sleeps and it wakes. And the woman can tell when she starts to feel her baby move what it's doing, whether it's in a sleep state or awake state. It has a schedule that has developed. Week 22, the baby has fingerprints, and now the mother can feel the baby now. It's 5.5 months and it's 12 inches long. Week 23, now I'm going to kind of group these together because after the 6th month, the baby's organs are pretty much it's finished in terms of their development. They've developed enough so that they have all those organs, but they're not ready for birth. They have to gain weight and they have to get heavier, and they've got to be able to be stronger before they can be born. At week 23, they're drinking amniotic fluid. At week 24, the baby has reached viability. By the 24th week, there's a good chance that if the baby were born here, they might actually be able to survive. They're 10 to 14 inches long and they weigh 1.5 pounds. That's not a lot. You usually don't consider babies to be viable until they're 3 or 4 pounds, but younger, because of medical techniques, possibly they can survive. Week 25, the baby is now moving on a regular basis. Week 26, the baby's eyes are now completely developed. Now you get into the 3rd trimester. In the 3rd trimester, this is week 27 to week 40 plus. Depending upon when the baby is born, they may be delayed in their birth for some reason. But usually 36 to 40 weeks is when the baby is born. Now the baby is completely developed by the 27th week. And they're developing more, they're growing more, they're gaining weight, and their temperature is beginning to be regulated so that after birth they'll be able to survive. Weeks 27 through 33, the baby develops a sense of smell. They can open and close their eyes. They can put on baby fat to make them heavier and stronger. They're about 15 inches long and they weigh about 3 pounds. That's still not very much. The baby is now the size of a small cantaloupe. And weeks 34 to 36, the lungs are developed. They now weigh about 5 pounds, and the baby is the size of a small watermelon. And then going on from there, we're getting to weeks 37 and 40. Week 37, they're full term, considered to be full term, although many are not born until 40 weeks. The week 38, they're 19 inches long, about 7 pounds, and they're ready for birth by week 40. By week 40, the baby is 20 inches long, 7 to 8 pounds, and that's the entire pregnancy. Now, it's a tremendous amount of growth from a very, very tiny cell, but the tiny cell has within it all the chromosomes and all the genes that they're supposed to have to be a human. So when someone says that baby isn't human until it's born, as I said before, it's a lot of nonsense. That baby has all of the chromosomes and genes necessary to make it a human being. So even though it's not developed, you couldn't call it anything else but a human being. In terms of the development, it's going to follow the pattern of the human being. It's going to have the genes of a human being, the amount of chromosomes of a human being, and so therefore you have a human just taking its time and developing at the rate that it's supposed to. So I'm going to close it here because what we're going to do next time, we're going to start into and discuss the after birth. I'll go into labor and delivery, but I won't spend a whole lot of time with it. And then we're going to be going into what happens to the developing baby as soon as it's born. How does it get to survive? How does it get to grow? And how you divide them up into various age periods and the problems that we have at various age periods and how those problems are resolved and the conflict. So I'm just giving you these last 2 sessions basically an overview of the developmental process, and then we go into the psychological process after that. So I'm going to close it here, and we'll continue with this next time. Please join me then.